Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, are you tired of being drawn by Draw Play Dave yet this weekend?
I was tired from moment one. What do you mean yet?
I mean, I appreciate the free publicity that he's putting out. He has more followers than we do, and as well than I do anyway. I haven't checked to see what the differences between the two of you is, but
how many does he have?
I know it's in the thousands. I know that we don't have that sort of, or we don't have a huge following. But I appreciate that he's providing this amount of free advertising for the show. I just wish it didn't come at the price of me being, well, you're Bunsen Beaker here, aren't you?
Yes, yeah. If I'm remembering my Muppets correctly, yes, I think I'm Bunsen Beaker.
Those who missed it, Draw Play Dave proceeded to post several pictures of the two of us both on Twitter and on his on the Norse Code Discord this weekend. He's got 26.6 thousand followers. Yeah, he's got more than the show.
Sure. Yeah. It is frustrating how talented he is and how quickly he can draw some of this stuff. I did enjoy that when he said it, when he tweeted it out, it was just listen to Norse Code. That was pretty good. Was it worth it? No. But at least it was there.
At least now we know what it looks like if you're, Dexter from Dexter's Laboratory and I'm Dee Dee. Not that I thought we needed to know that, but now we have that.
I don't know that either of us enjoyed that one. I'll be.
I had a good laugh. Actually, I had a good oh lord, looking at that. So there is that. Well, welcome to this new episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well. A note about last episode, apologies for the edit in the middle of the interview. I have no idea where that came from, and apologies if that ruined the episode for you. But it did manage to get the episode under 2 hours, so there is that. But a part of the interview was cut accidentally, so that was an apology. That was an apology from me. I did get many notices about that. I appreciate everyone telling me I couldn't fix it. Apologies. But welcome to this episode of Norse Code. We got plenty of stuff to go over. We have a review of the Chargers game. It was a heartbreaker, again. A lot of turnovers, again. And we have a mailbag as well. But before we start, again, thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. If you enjoy the show and would like to help support us financially, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go over to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there for $3.50 a month, or a little bit less for the year subscription. You get access to bonus materials. You can be one of the cool kids in the Discord that we spent a lot of time talking to over the last couple of days. That was a lot of fun. The game day threads are a good way to spend your day, a good way to commiserate, quite frankly, with your fellow Vikings fans. And you get access to that over at patreon.com/NorseCode. Special thank you to Matt, who joined over on Patreon this week. Thank you, Matt, so much. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well if you'd like to make a one-time donation, or you can go over to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up any number of merch items, including a baby onesie, which they've been posting baby onesies again on the Discord. I just assume 9 months ago there was a baby, thing going on. There is
a boom, if you will.
I'm not even touching it. I am outside the realm of, so nope. You can also get shower curtains, t-shirts, stickers, magnets, all of that over at norsecode.threadless.com. Also, let's make it official. The Flight Co. Tower, 7 p.m., November 17th, Denver, Colorado. This is where we will be having the Denver live show. It is the Friday, 7 p.m., Flight Co. Tower, Denver, Colorado. This is going to be a lot of fun. This is it's the former airport out in Denver, and it is the air traffic control tower, and they turned it into this bar / Dave and Buster's thing. It's really, really cool. There's multiple levels of the place. We're getting details as to exactly where we will be recording inside of the building soon, but it is fantastic. There's all sorts of stuff in there: games, bowling, Arif will be drinking, like it'll be fantastic. But there's food, there's drinks. This place is really fun. I have been to Flight Co Tower before and really enjoyed the experience, and I think all of you will as well. So check it out. Denver, Colorado, Flight Co Tower, 7 p.m., November 17th. We will be doing our live show. I'm going to work on having it be streamed live to our through our Discord for the Patreon people. So I'm going to be attempting to do something like that, and then putting the episode out immediately after we're done recording. So check it out. Flight Co Tower, 7 p.m., November 17th, Denver, Colorado. Cool. So we have a place. We are giving details out of this live show. It is actually happening. Check it out. Dusty will be in attendance, and if he's not, boy, he better have a good reason.
Wait, what are you going to do to him that hasn't already been done to him?
God, he may actually end up in my basement at that point.
Thought you didn't have one, James.
I will build one. If he doesn't make it, there's no reason not to at that point. Well, let's talk about the Chargers game and what ended up happening there. I suppose the most notable thing that happened was the fact that the Vikings recovered a fumble from another team.
That's crazy. That's got to be the highlight of the game.
Like it almost has to be at this point. Like, okay, fine. There was a great Justin Jefferson touchdown, a couple of great routes. JJ went down, turned out just to be cramps. Like, stuff happened in the game, fine, and we'll talk about whether or not they should have clocked the ball and all of that. But like, important, like baby steps. The Vikings recovered a fumble from someone. That turns out that matters.
Yeah, that's that's so good. It was one of five. That is important to point out that in a sense, the law of large numbers kind of played out here. But yeah, like you said, baby steps. I don't know how much patience we have for the development of this particular skill. But, hey, it's better than none of the fumbles. And, okay, admittedly, 2 of the fumbles of those 5 kind of don't count because one was out of bounds and the other one was a strip sack on 3rd down, so it kind of doesn't matter. And it was like barely, like it wouldn't have been a sack if it wasn't a fumble. It was just like he just batted it out. And it would have been nice, but Daniil Hunter was the only one next. It's like maybe, but also like there were 2 fumbles that weren't fumbles, one of which was kind of unfairly not a fumble in the Vikings' favor. So I don't know how much latitude I want to give them for the 2 fumbles that were that. Okay, it's bad. It's bad. All of it's bad, but we have the kind of like a light in the darkness sort of thing. But as a reminder, it is still mostly darkness.
Much. And definitely we're feeling that after the game. I suppose what we could start with is the fact that the Vikings attempted to establish the run and were successful. Was this because of what they were doing was, actually being schemed properly? Or, the more common belief, the Chargers are really bad at stopping the run?
The Chargers are catastrophically bad at stopping the run. That's true. The Eagles are extraordinarily good. Did you see what they just did to the Buccaneers? The Eagles are extremely good at stopping the run. So those 2 together maybe gives us a clearer understanding of how good the Vikings are at running the ball. Remember, against the Buccaneers, they didn't get like a ton of yards per carry. Like it was like 3.1 from Madison, but they had a really high success rate, 45%. In this game, you had both a high success rate and yards per carry. Against the Eagles, it was a low success rate and a low yards per carry. I feel like the truth is, in this actual case, somewhere in between. I think the most of the time when people say the truth is somewhere in between, that's like an excuse not to think very hard, right? Like that's just, I don't want to think about it too much. There's truth somewhere in between. Here in this case, given the relative extremes and what we've seen from what these other teams are capable of doing, yeah, I would say that, like, in this case, it is somewhere in the middle. So the Vikings might actually have an okay running game. And I think people overreacted to week 1, and given what happened in week 2, it like kind of allowed us to be like, oh, God, they just can't run the ball. Maybe they can run the ball fine, and the Eagles have one of the best run-stopping units that history has seen, which that sounds like a hyperbole for me to make fun of the point I just made, but no, they might actually, based off of what we've seen. That is incredible what they're doing right now.
It's very possible. This is a team that can stop just about anything. Well, let's talk about the decision involving the run, because it seemed to come at the cost of, let's say, the passing game, but like it was being successful for a little while. But Justin Jefferson didn't get a single target until like partway through the second quarter.
Yeah, I remember I tweeted it out. I was like, it sucks that he didn't get a target. I genuinely was like, that sucks. And I wasn't like, I can't believe the Vikings didn't scheme it up, because I didn't think people would be that upset by it. And they were. And a lot of people were like, I can't believe you didn't get any targets. I can't believe they wouldn't give him any targets in the first quarter. And like Sam Ekstrom, which like you got to follow Sam. He just doesn't have enough followers. He like is good at this. Just follow Sam Ekstrom. He's like tweeting out like, why is everyone like mad about the lack of, they ran 5 plays in the first quarter. Are you kidding me? And it's like, yeah, Sam's right. Like, of course they didn't. They started off with like 5, so maybe it wasn't 5 plays, but it was like 7, right? They started off with like 5 runs and 2 passes, and that was it, right? And like, yeah, okay, they ran the ball. They didn't target Justin Jefferson. The runs were working, and like as much as targets to Jefferson are like really positive propositions generally for the Vikings, we have learned, especially in Viking specific history, but overall in football, that like predetermining targets to a receiver is actually not that great of an idea. The Rams actually just demonstrated that, right? Like they've been targeting Puka Nacua a ton, right, over the past 2 games. And then in this game, they don't target him very much, but they don't force it either. Now, obviously, the Bengals ended up winning because they figured out their offense by the end of the game. But the Rams were kind of dealing for a little bit because they just kind of let the offense play itself out. Justin Jefferson is the best receiver in the NFL. If you just let the offense play itself out, he will achieve targets, which, of course, is what happened. He got 149 yards. So, yeah, he didn't get targets, but the Vikings were successful, and I don't want to trade off like legitimately successful and effective and positive expected points plays for the possibility that you could get a positive play. Because again, a natural target to Jefferson is not the same as a forced target to Jefferson. And you're basically asking for predetermined reads. And the whole idea that KOC set up in the offseason for why the Vikings would invest in someone like a Josh Oliver was that by effectively threatening the run from a variety of situations and formations, they would take leverage away from Jefferson. Maybe not like remove a double team, but if a double team is the product of like a safety shading in Jefferson's direction, well, now that safety has to scoot up closer to the line of scrimmage or shade off to be closer to the center of the field, that kind of thing. Like you're not eliminating the double team, but you're giving him a little bit of extra space, and we know what he can do with a little bit of extra space. So I don't mind that they did that. I'm mostly surprised that a bunch of people are like, why haven't they been targeting Jefferson? It's like, well, they had like 2 pass plays, man. Like, yeah, it would have been nice if one of those 2 pass plays was to Jefferson, but that's just, you're like, that's definitely nitpicking at that point.
And as it turned out, you were right. He did end up not only getting open, but ended up doing quite well for himself, despite the fact that he didn't reach his average yards for the season.
Yeah. That was fun. I'm glad that like, because sometimes I tweet out a joke tweet like that and people like get like actually mad. But everyone cottoned on, right? Because I was like, yeah, he's not hitting 154.5. Really disappointing game for him. But a bunch of people are like, yeah, watched. Really hate to see one of your star players do that.
It's unfortunate. He's going the way of Michael Thomas now.
Soon he'll only be catching slants.
And then catching slants and throwing shade. It's awful. Well, Cousins played well for the most part, I feel. Still, people are blaming the loss on him. Other than the final throw, is there a reason why people could potentially like be blaming him for this?
I mean, so I guess it depends on like where you set your standard or expectations.
I mean, we can also throw in the clocking thing here as to like the end of the game and the decisions that were being made.
Sure, and I do want to I want to kind of separate that, but that is fair when we're talking about the holistic responsibility that Cousins carries for the loss. But like overall, my conclusion is that kind of no, right? Overall, I don't think so. I do think that he isn't playing up to his standard. I would say that it's interesting. The final throw, like the actual throw itself, was one of his better placed passes throughout the game. It was a very good throw, and it needed to be exactly where it was. And he did it at the right speed. Like it was a very good throw. It was one of his better throws in the game. He has not been that consistently accurate over these 3 games, like we're used to seeing from 2020 and 2021. Like he has been out of rhythm, not playing with the correct timing, not hitting ball placement as consistently as he has in the past. The difference is that he has been doing a pretty good job, or at least last year was doing a pretty good job of adapting to circumstances and breaking out of his shell and painting outside the numbers, all the things that he historically has not been very good at. Right now, we're not seeing that either, but he's still playing very well. So I like all of these kind of criticisms are within the context of this guy's doing a pretty good job, right? Both of the interceptions he's thrown hit the receiver in the hands. Like I don't think the one to Osborne was placed all that well, right? Like, but it hit the receiver in the hands. And the Hawkinson one, like, you can't really ask. He's throwing away from a defender. Hawkinson should know that the ball is going to be there because he should know what the leverage of the defender is. It just tips up twice. Like, come on. So there's that. But for the most part, he did a pretty good job going through his progressions, going through his reads quickly enough, getting the ball to the right spot. He was playing under a tremendous amount of pressure. I think PFF only gave him like a 36% or something like that in pressure total. And that doesn't seem right to me at all. Like that just feels pretty wrong. I also think that about the Herbert pressure total, which is at like 23%. I think the Vikings actually did get pressure. They just weren't getting home. But, all of that kind of aside, I do think that he mostly played all right. It would have been nice if he hit that like corner route to KJ Osborne right before the end of the game, because that had touchdown written all over it, and that would have been nice. And he missed it, and like he got hit while he was throwing, but that was kind of a product of how he moved in the pocket and all of that. But yeah, he was under a lot of pressure, and he played well despite that. That said, let's talk about that end of game sequence. So I broke it down in a lot of detail over on the Substack. So if you want like the full kind of story there, in fact, I think all of it is before the paywall. I don't know. I might put the paywall in the middle of it. Go find out. But I do think that like that final drive, there's been a discussion among analytically minded people about ways to handle end of game situations that has nothing to do with timeouts. Like if you have no timeouts left, should you spike the ball or not? And I remember this conversation way back in like the early 2010s when it was held on like blogs like smartfootball.com and advancedfootballstats.com before it became Advanced Football Analytics, before it shut down because they got hired to run ESPN Stats and Info, about whether or not to spike the ball. And generally speaking, they came to the conclusion that most of the time it's a bad idea to spike the ball. And so that kind of thinking, which has not really been a huge conversation as much as like going for it on fourth down or whatever, right? Like that's been like one of the things that analytics people have talked about, being in 11 personnel a lot, running play action a lot, passing the ball a lot. Those are the conversations that people are having a lot, right? But like some of these kind of smaller strategic considerations have also been part of the conversation that just hasn't hit a lot of the media about, analytically driven football strategic considerations. And the argument essentially is it better to have a couple more seconds or to have one more play? And generally speaking, and if you run it through like WPA calculators and stuff like that, it's better to have one more play, right? It's better to be on 1st and 10 with 30 seconds left than 2nd and 10 with 27 seconds left. Like that's the difference, right? So that was the thinking, right? And that's what KOC isolates at the end of the game. So our automatic assumption should be that the process that they were entering into that end of game movement, essentially the end of game kind of drive, was that it was the right approach. The problem, obviously, was that it was executed poorly, and I think that that's a different calculation. Like I think that's a different conversation, but people are combining that conversation. They said they should have just spiked it, and it's like, no, I think that they were right not to. So, we should also point out that Hawkinson did drop a pass earlier in that same drive, and they required a penalty, gave him a new set of downs. But okay, so it's 2nd and 15 because the Hawkinson injury, and he comes back obviously, but like the Hawkinson injury, the Vikings are out of timeouts. They get it back because of Brandon Powell. Hawkinson catches the ball with 38 seconds left. The Vikings did not hurry to the line. So that's one problem I have. The second is that instead of running a play at around 30 seconds, which is probably when you were able to run that play, they're waiting for a call to come into the sideline. I talk a little bit about the Vikings game management coordinator in this piece. And so you can read about it in the piece. You can read about what Kevin O'Connell specifically said. But the problem was that for about 18 seconds, they just don't run a play. Cousins is like trying to hear the call. It's not coming in. And O'Connell says after the game, it probably would have been better if the headset went out entirely. And I think that he's right, because the Vikings are in this ambiguous situation where they have to figure out what to do as opposed to a process that they have practiced and they know what to do, because they'll go to the code word offense, right? The code word offense is you line up in your 2-minute, Cousins shouts code words at the line of scrimmage, and everyone is expected to understand based off of those code words what that means. Now, the reason he couldn't hear the play call, part of that has to do with what sounded like a little bit of a headset malfunction, but also because Vikings fans wouldn't shut up. I think that that's something that we got to talk about. Like, the offense should not be limited by the home team crowd in any circumstance. Like, I don't care that it's the final 2 minutes of a game. The crowd is impacting the play negatively for the Vikings. That sucks. Like, I'm glad that there was a huge play, but like, we've seen crowds get managed better for other teams before. We've seen Peyton Manning do this with the Colts and the Broncos. We've seen Tom Brady do this with the Patriots. We know that sometimes the offense needs the stadium to shut up, and the Vikings fans did not shut up. So that's like part of it, right? That said, the Vikings do also play away games, right? And so they need to have an answer to loud crowd noise, and they didn't. And so as soon as it became clear that it was unclear, basically, as soon as it became difficult for Cousins to get the call in, which may have taken a couple of seconds, they should have immediately run up to spike the ball. Now, one issue here with Cousins, and this is something that, he definitely deserves criticism for, is that he seems very hesitant to take control or to take command. And I think it's because, and this goes way back, in the after game press conference, the post game presser, he says, so someone asks him, I think it might have been Dane Mizutani, but someone asks him, do you have the ability to just, call the play? If you can't hear it, can you just call the play? If you can hear it, can you call the play? And he's like, oh yeah, I can do whatever I want. I can call a quarterback sneak. I can call whatever play. But I try not to do that. That's what he said. I try not to do that. And then he references the fact that he called on his own a quarterback sneak against Buffalo, and that was a 4th and 1, and it failed. Okay. My personal theory, and obviously, it is really difficult to do a psychological breakdown of somebody that you haven't really had a real conversation with. Like, all of my conversations with the Cousins are professional, and they're mostly me asking questions and him answering them. They're not friends, obviously, right? And he has not asked me to be his therapist, right? So obviously take everything here with an enormous grain of salt.
I mean,
That's
he could have. I mean, this could be in your wheelhouse.
Right. Certainly it's a missed opportunity
else.
for him. Yeah,
Yes.
no, I think, should he ask, by all means. But I think that he is scared of control in that sense. And it goes all like, I remember, like I read this book, for his book for his for the profile I did over at The Athletic, right? Where I did this long psychological profile of Cousins based off of all of the things that he said or talked about. And he has this need for things to be under control, right? He needs things to be very defined. And I don't just mean like on the field in terms of like he needs to see the play out. He needs to play textbook coverage. I think that is part of it, right? Like I think that his need for things to be in control gets expressed in his paint by numbers style of football, but also he does not like the ambiguity of a non-guaranteed contract. He does not like the ambiguity of a quarterback competition. He does not like when the ownership does not stick up for him, and he doesn't like 1-year contracts because he doesn't know what his standing is. He tells a story of when he was playing quarterback for Michigan State, right? And I think it was against Notre Dame, where he goes off script. He does something like his coach says one thing and he wants to do another thing. I think it was his coach wanted to kick the field goal and he was like, no, I can win it because the field goal would tie it, right? And then they would get sent into overtime. And Cousins was like, no, I can win it. I can win it here. I'm going to go for the touchdown. And it doesn't work out. He throws an interception, right? And this story is like really like it forefronts the book, right? Like you've got a little bit of his childhood, you've got a little bit of this, and then he goes into basically what it was like playing quarterback for Michigan State. And the story is like one of like 2 gameplay stories he tells out of his time at Michigan State. Like it is really big for him, and it like plays really seriously in his brain, right? And he took control away from the coach, and it was catastrophic. They lost the game because interception down 3, right? Then the same thing happens against Buffalo. He takes control. It's nearly catastrophic. They should have lost the game. Of course, the Vikings win because of like Eric Kendricks and dark magic, right? So it seems like Cousins is conditioned to think that if he goes off script, it's just not good. And that's not a good place for a quarterback to be. Like, he like does need to take control. And so I think that played a role in him waiting and waiting and waiting to get the signal in. And eventually he does call the play himself. He's like, I can't hear it. I'm just going to call the play. And he does. And it turns out it's the same play that O'Connell wanted to call. It was the one that Cousins did call. And so that's, kind of nice, but it would have been serendipitous if in fact they won as a result of it. And now it's just like, well, what was even the point then if you were just already going to do the same thing? So I think that played a role in him just waiting and waiting and waiting instead of just lining everyone, spiking the ball or lining everyone up and just running a play. O'Connell says like, look, I should have sent a signal, or I should have just said clock it, or I should have said spike it or whatever, right? Because look, if you're cutting in and out, like every word in a play call matters, right? Because like the first couple of words are the protection, the next couple of words are the play, the next couple of words are the play tags. Like if you miss any of these words, like it's designed to be a very efficient system. If you miss any of these words, you're not getting the play. It's just now you don't have any of the play, right? So that's all like pretty relevant, right? But if he just says the word spike or says the word clock like 5 times, 1 or 2 times that's going to come through the headset and he's just going to clock the ball. So O'Connell says, I should have clocked it. Really, he means that Cousins obviously should have, but he wants to say that he wants to be the one that takes responsibility because he's the head coach. And Cousins basically says the same thing, that we should have spiked it or I should have clocked it, right? That's a problem. But obviously that's not what lost them the game. They had a couple of shots. They had a little bit of time, 12 seconds left, right? They could have run 2, possibly 3, and given the speed of that first play, I think 3's on the table. 3 plays, right? Now which means the 18 seconds that they wasted, like they could have run a couple of plays too. And they also said that like they wanted to run a play quickly. They didn't want to spike it because the defense would be on their heels and they wouldn't get set. And like, that's cool. I actually like that. That makes sense, but you got to do it for it to work. Um, but yeah, uh, I mean, like that wasn't the problem. That's very frustrating, and it points to a problem that is annoying. I don't think Cousins was rushed when he threw that throw because it was a great throw. He threw it exactly where he needed to. I don't think Hawkinson was like rushed. First of all, nobody was rushed. They just kind of walking to the line of scrimmage. Like, what are you doing? But second, like when you run a play, you're running a play. Like you don't need to run it any different. It's like fine. So um, that wasn't the reason the Vikings lost. It's just it happened at the same time and it was very obvious. But like the ball just got tipped up. That's it. That's why they lost. So yeah, there's some problems here kind of boiling in the background, but they could have run 3 plays, which is as many plays as they would have run if they had spiked the ball. So okay.
It's unfortunate that it ended the way it did. But considering everything that had happened during this game, I still had belief this was going to end up being a tie. Like I had
I
every
think so,
belief.
yeah. It really felt like, but like the score at that point kind of made it impossible because it was 4 points, and so you had to.
They had to score, and then the Chargers would have had to. Allen would have had to make some big run and then like get tackled at like Herbert. The 2. Sorry, Herbert. Well, I'm talking about the receiver.
Oh, Keenan. Oh, yeah. I was like, Allen. Josh Allen. Yeah,
no. Yeah, Keenan Allen would have had to make
sense.
some reception for like 60, 70 yards. Not unheard of, especially this game. And then possibly breaking the record for receiving yards. But like, making it down to like the 20 or the 30 and then a field goal and then everyone just, pooping the bed for overtime. Fine. Great. I can see that totally happening. I honestly thought this was going to end up being an overtime tie. It had all the markings of it because this was an incredible game that things just happened in where you just, oh yeah, of course, this is the Chargers and the Vikings. Like the fact that on multiple occasions balls were just tipped into the hands of receivers for the Chargers, especially the one touchdown where you just go, oh yeah, of course. Why the hell wouldn't this sort of thing happen?
Yeah, so a ball got deflected up into the air near the end zone 3 times in that game. Twice it ended up in the hands of Chargers, and a third time it ended up on the ground. That third time would have been a touchdown to Jordan Addison. Like it's so annoying. It's so annoying. Like, and especially because like a bunch of people got really mad at the Caleb Evans for not like grabbing that interception. When like, first of all, the fact that he got into position to make that play, like that's requires a fair amount of talent. He gets his hands on the ball. That's a deflection. You're in a really good spot if you alter the path of the ball. Like 999 times out of 1,000, that's a win for the defense. Now, obviously you want an interception, but like that's almost always a pass deflection. The ball hits the ground. You're fine because the receiver's hands are already in a place where he expects the ball to be, and that ball is no longer there. The ball goes into his hands, hits his helmet, bounces out. That should have been it. It's not, but that should have been it. And now it's a touchdown for Joshua Palmer. Everyone gets mad at the Caleb Evans, but then Asante Samuel Jr. is covering Jordan Addison. The ball hits his hands, then hits Jordan Addison in the hands, and no Chargers fans are mad at Asante Samuel, right? It from the perspective of the defensive back, right? From the perspective of the fan of the team who that defensive back plays for, there is no difference. None. And it's really just because one receiver was able to haul it in and the other one wasn't, which has nothing to do with how well those respective defensive backs played that play, because they played it identically, right? They played it identically. But people are mad at the Caleb Evans because the outcome instead of what a Caleb Evans actually had control over. So that I think is just nuts, right? And of course, the third one hits TJ Hawkinson, hits another defender, boom, interception at the end. So it's crazy that happened 3 times at the end zone, right? Like, and then every time it just happened to bounce the Chargers' way. Cool, that rules. Also, the fumbles almost every time happen to bounce the Chargers' way. Now, most of the time, the Chargers were actually fumbling, so that's kind of like a nice. But like, it still was mostly Chargers. They recovered like 80% of the fumbles in that game. So, And like, how often are the Chargers the lucky ones?
Yeah, they had to play the Vikings in order to be the lucky ones here.
Yeah,
That's
honestly.
that's
Yeah.
precisely what ended up happening. So there were a ton of fumbles, including one from Kirk. This is after the game. Kevin O'Connell was putting it squarely on the fumbles, and had even gotten to the point of saying, well, that if players can't hold onto the ball, we'll have to play the players that can. And I just sat there like, I don't know how to put this, but that's
You gonna put Nick Mullins out there?
Yeah. I know you just signed a new running back, but really? That's and like while we're at it, can we break down why like what happened during that challenge as far as the fumble was concerned with Madison? Was that actually the right call for the refs to be making in the spirit of the game? Or like what?
I mean, the Vikings got away with murder on that one.
Yeah.
Right? Like we could talk about how like the Chargers were lucky on some aspects of it, but I think from an officiating perspective, on balance, the Chargers got kind of screwed. Right? Like the OPI, I was just like, that one's kind of soft. That fumble thing, like what is going on? But yeah, so in this case, the officials said that they had ruled forward progress, which I didn't hear a whistle as it was happening. So I actually feel pretty weird about that. But because replays don't have the whistle on it, the replay would basically just have to show that the ball was coming out of Madison's hand as soon as he got contacted, which I think is what the announcer said. And that's not what happened. But like a running back is never called for forward progress in that situation, like ever. Like if everyone is still fighting and there's still the possibility that the running back could gain yardage or lose yardage, right? They'll keep that play going until it's obvious that nothing's going to happen. Like, can you imagine how bad football would be if that was always how they called forward progress? Like, oh, that dude's 320 pounds. That running back's not getting out of it. Let's just blow the whistle. Like, that's crazy. I can't believe that he was like in this guy's grasp for like a second. It was very obviously a fumble to me. But because they ruled on the field that it was forward progress, I don't know why. And again, I didn't hear a whistle. That became essentially unchallengeable because it's like in a judgment call, right? It's like pass interference in theory is unchallengeable until it is, until it isn't. So yeah, I don't know what that's about. Very weird to me.
It was odd. And like afterwards, it was just sitting there, like I think and there was some discussion online as to what like the reasoning behind it and everything, but it still seemed like the wrong call. But the Vikings were able to not have that drive go completely to waste. So, yay.
Yeah, hooray! Yeah,
and everything worked out. Yay! The defense decided not to cover Keenan Allen. That seems like a poor choice.
Yeah, he set a franchise record for yards. And the Chargers have a pretty good history of receivers, so that's a little bit frustrating. I will say that like this defense is like very close, but the problem is that like when it fails big by design, and so being very close is not super helpful. Like in a lot of defenses, if you're very close, that's the difference between 10 yards and 15 yards. And for the Vikings, if you're close, that's the difference between -3 yards and 20. And so, like, being close and not getting there just results in some pretty big plays. And based on what I'm watching, I think that this defense is pretty close to being very good. But, like, there's just sometimes there's some miscommunications, or a cornerback is making just a couple of extra mistakes based off of like what their assignments should be in this defense, and like things go haywire. Like I'm not going to blame Byron Murphy for that insane Mike Williams catch that ended up getting challenged, but because there's no camera angles, ended up being ruled a catch, which because of the camera angles and because of the call on the field and all that, I think the officials were correct to rule that a catch, or to rule that the call stands. And honestly, because it was pretty dope in real time, I think they were probably correct to call it a catch on the field. But in reality, I don't think that was a catch. And I think that if there were more camera angles, it probably wouldn't have been ruled a catch. That's life. I'm not going to blame Byron Murphy for that, right? I'm not going to blame Byron Murphy for some of the incredible catches that Keenan Allen had when he was in his coverage. But I am going to blame him for screwing up his assignment on the Mike Williams play that was the 49-yard touchdown, which, I mean, Mike Williams, by the way, ACL tear, even in the wins that are lucky, the Chargers are unlucky, right? And it's not like Quentin Johnston is doing anything for them. So we'll see if he can step up right away. But it sounds like they're not really all that confident in him. So it might be Joshua Palmer time. I don't know. But yeah, so the Vikings know exactly how most teams respond to their zero blitzes. And by zero blitzes, cover zero, which is not this cat. Just going to wait it out. Okay. 3, 2, 1. The Vikings know exactly how most teams respond to zero blitzes. And a zero blitz is not, it just means that there's cover zero behind the blitz, which is not, we're not covering anybody, but it means that there's no safety with the deep zone, right? Cover 2, there's 2 zones. Cover 1, there's 1 zone. Cover 3, there's 3 zones, which is not a deep safety. It's 2 corners and a safety. And then the numbers start getting weird because cover 6 is not 6 zones. It's cover 4, which is 4 zones, plus cover 2, cover 6, sometimes called cover 7, depending on the coach. But for the most part, what this means, cover 0, is that there is no deep safety. And so every cornerback, or every coverage defender, I should say, not cornerback, every coverage defender is on an island. Well, if that happens, they're going to be likely playing off coverage, because if they play press coverage and they get beat off the release, that's it, game over. It's a 50-yard touchdown. So they have to play off coverage so that they can't get beat over the top and so that they can force a pretty short throw. So most teams will run slants and screens. The Vikings were phenomenal against slants and screens. On passes behind the line of scrimmage, so screens, essentially, the Vikings allowed 4 yards an attempt. They were phenomenal at that. So in terms of the way that they respond to a lot of this stuff, they're pretty good. But they're not consistent enough to make this really high risk, high reward defense work out. So they, Mekhi Blackmon, for example, had a very similar problem in the end zone, where he's confronted with a decision and doesn't know what to do for about 0.2 of a second. That's enough time for a guy to get open, touchdown, right? Same thing with Byron Murphy. Justin Herbert is rolling out. Now there's a possibility that he could run. He is a running threat. A bunch of defenders close down on him. Byron Murphy, flat-footed. He doesn't know if he wants to run down or catch up. Or no, sorry, it was the Keenan Allen one. So it's a screen, right? And so we think screen. They've been running screens all game. We're gonna collapse on them, and a bunch of defenders come up to tackle Keenan Allen on the screen. But Mike Williams is running that way. He's not blocking, which you would do on a screen. He's running that way. And Byron Murphy takes even longer, half a second, to decide what to do. And Mike Williams is open. And so it's just those small things that led to really big plays. And Justin Herbert gets out of all of these pressures, right? There's, I think, 4 quarterback hits and 1 sack, and the sack wasn't even a hit, right? So 4 quarterback hits and 1 sack, and then a couple of other pressures besides. But there are other pressures where I don't even think PFF logged it as a pressure, but the Vikings literally get their hands on the guy, and he just makes a pocket movement, and he gets out and he throws the ball. And it's the Vikings are so close to those pressures meaning something, right? If instead of Dean Lowry, it's I don't know, an average defensive tackle. I can't even think of, if it's Sebastian Thunderbucket, right? If it's Tom Johnson, right? That's a sack. That's a sack. That's the Vikings win the game if they have, and it's a close game that goes back to the final 12 seconds. So you could change anything and they win the game. But it's just really frustrating when you've got a player as poor as Dean Lowry out there, when you had a lot of opportunities to make a move in free agency and grab a guy better than him. Or maybe if instead of on plays like that, it was Jonathan Bullard, right? Players that you have on your roster even, that those turn into more meaningful pressures that move him off his spot, or they turn into quarterback hits that accumulate, or they turn into sacks, right? And that's enough to win the game. So it is a lot. It is a lot. That defense is so close to being so meaningfully good and destructive. And this is kind of what happened to the Brian Flores defense in 2020. 2019, he takes over the Miami defense. They run this crazy, super aggressive, we're going to blitz 60% of the time. In this game, it was 82% of the time. The two most blitz-heavy games of like the past 17 or so years came this week. And one of them was from the Vikings. The other one was from Wink Martindale against the 49ers. And then the next most blitz-heavy game was like Wink Martindale for the Ravens, also against the 49ers. Kind of weird, but there you go. Yeah, so I don't know about 80%, but like, yeah, and if you're going to blitz, you do need to get pressure. You do need to hit the quarterback a lot more. You do need to get, but like, they were really close to pressure. They were really close to being in the right spot. Byron Murphy, a lot of the times, was in good position on these plays. Caleb Evans, a lot of times, was in good position on these plays. Like, these are like, and obviously because we're talking about close games, you know, you can always say if this small thing changed, they would have won the game. But like, I'm talking about huge differences based off of tiny mistakes. A touchdown given up by Mekhi Blackman, a touchdown given up by Byron Murphy, a touchdown kind of given up by Caleb Evans on the deflection. Just tiny things that vastly change your success rate. Well, they minorly change success rate. That's how success rate works. But like your EPA per play, right? If the Vikings just drill down on the rules in every situation a little bit better in the offseason for what to do in the situation, they don't just win the game. The defense comes out smelling like roses. Like that, I think the defense is close, but it's tough to see because they play such a high variance style that close still means like giving up 20 or 30-yard plays.
It's so frustrating. It's so frustrating to watch. At least they didn't give up 1,000,000 yards in the same drive all on the run this time. So again, progress. But this is just such a frustrating defense to watch. It's almost there. It has moments where it shines, but it's just not quite there.
Yeah.
At least we didn't give up 70.
Yeah. Or 41.
Yeah. I mean, these are... I cannot believe that the Bears and the Broncos play each other this week. That's
so funny. Also, okay, I want to get this out of the way. There's this like Twitter account like Scoops Jackson or something like that, like that's like tweeting out, hey, so my sources say that the owners think it was unsporting of the Dolphins to score so many points. And I like, yeah, there's a bunch of responses that you have to that, which is just like, well, if it's disrespectful of the game of football to score so many points, why don't you stop them? Like, yeah, okay, fine, sure. I have never heard of this guy in my life. Like, just the blue check mark doesn't mean anything anymore. You like, everyone understands that, right? Like, you could just buy one and it doesn't give you any more credibility. It gives you more reach, right? It gives you access to like useful tools like TweetDeck, but it doesn't mean that you're credible, right? So this guy Scoops Jackson, who has scoops, and you can click on his profile to see the highlights of all of his scoops. That's what his bio says. Click on my profile to see my highlights of my scoops or something. I've never heard of this guy break a story in my life. And so I don't know that it's credible that the owners are really upset that the Dolphins scored 70. I don't know, but you know, if so, stop them. They played their backups in the third quarter, right? They played their backups in the third quarter. They declined to kick the final field goal, which would have tied them for the most points ever scored in the game, which very respectful of you, Mike McDaniel, but please next time kick that would have ruled.
Watching that whole thing was quite frankly remarkable, but after the fact,
if Nathaniel Hackett was the coach, obviously they would have scored 90 points. I mean, we know that Nathaniel Hackett is a worse coach than Sean Payton, because Sean Payton said so.
Yeah, exactly. Remember the time that Sean Payton ran up the score against the Colts 70 to something? I'm reminded of that. I feel nothing for no tears at all for anything involving Sean Payton.
Yeah, he regularly runs up the score, which again, I don't have like a problem with. I don't do it.
Remember,
fine.
6 touchdowns? Touchdowns by the same player?
Yeah, and Vikings fans were appropriately mad at the Vikings for that. Like, that's correct, right? But yeah, like, he runs up the score regularly. He was... I don't think it is technically appropriate for me to say that he ran a bounty program, but he ran a program that had a bounty program in it, right? We could say that. He ran a team that had a bounty program. I don't care. I don't care. This guy sucks. If anyone deserves to have 70 points run up on him, it's the guy that for some reason runs a training camp in West Virginia for a team based out of New Orleans. And I don't know what that reason is, but former player Junior Gillette, who is not a good person, alleges it has something to do with a mistress. I wouldn't know anything about that, but I am putting that out into the universe.
You know, every year I forget about the West Virginia thing, and every year I'm reminded of it, and every year it's funny.
It's amazing.
Every year it's fantastic, and I feel nothing for him.
At least the PR program for the team that he runs didn't run cover for any bishops or priests in the diocese or archdiocese near Louisiana for anybody that may have been accused of anything. I don't know anything about that. Like, obviously, the Bensons, were that to have happened, would be of a greater culpability for ordering any PR team to do that. But it's not as if a coach doesn't have knowledge or control of a program or has the ability to whistleblow on something as dynamic as that, were that allegedly to have happened. I don't know. But Sean Payton, no tears.
At some point, we do need to do a watch along with that awful movie. Kevin James is really popular online at some point. We might actually have to do that.
Well, I don't even know why that meme just appeared out of nowhere.
It's that picture. It's that stupid picture.
It's an amazing, and the way people have been using it is incredible. I just don't know how it started.
Yeah. Let's wrap this up. The Vikings lose again. The Vikings fumble again. They recovered one. Offensive line looked, well, can we do something? Can we just shoot Ed Ingram into the sun? Like, is that like a thing, please? Are we?
I would never suggest that, but it is possible that he's not playing next week. Okay, what's annoying about this is that, so PFF gave Ed Ingram a pretty good grade in this game. And I was like, that's really? Because I saw a lot of mistakes. And they were like, yeah, but his pass block grade was 47, but his run block grade, that was like 90 plus. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. You gotta be kidding me. Because I saw him blow some blocks in the run game and Madison just not deal with it. He was fine. He was like, oh, defender in my face. I've got another 9 yards to go. So I'm just going to go there. It was fine. I did watch some of because I wasn't focused on Ingram the whole time, right? I did watch some of the rest of the runs, and he was doing a really great job. And my sincere hope is that doesn't trick the Vikings, because the pass blocking is a huge problem, and that needs to be solved way more than, like, look, if the run blocking improved so much that they went from 3 yards a carry to 9 yards a carry, or whatever it ended up being by the end of the game, probably not 9 by the end, but a lot of big runs. In the sacrifices you put in a guy that's only going to get you 6 yards instead of 9, but he pass blocked better, 100% do that. 100% do that. So that's my concern. But we do need to mention that, like, Brian O'Neill, I thought, played a pretty poor game. And that sucks because we're very used to these tackles, like, being like, finally this is solved. We don't got to talk about him. Like, did Ezra Cleveland screw up? Let's talk about that. Did Austin Schlottman screw up? Let's talk about that. By the way, the two of them were fine. Not great, but fine, which is, I think, way better than we expected given what happened to Cousins. But, like, Darisaw had a couple of screw-ups. Brian O'Neill had a lot of screw-ups. Ed Ingram had even more than that in terms of screw-ups. And that was the issue in this game. And I like Dalton Reisner, I think, probably resolves a problem here with Ed Ingram. But I don't, like, you got to figure out if Brian O'Neill is okay. Like, that is a concern. So I'm not panicking with him yet, but it's like, hey, maybe this doesn't solve every problem on the planet. But, let's keep an eye on this. So I just want to put that out there. But yeah, the offensive line, big problem.
I mean, it's worth noting that the Bears have said that you shouldn't panic. So I feel like the Vikings, which are
the Bears
didn't
have a normative statement about panicking. They just didn't. They're not panicking.
Yeah, they are not panicking. I feel like the Vikings are doing better as a team and probably as a culture inside and outside the building. Feel like we can not totally panic, but we do play the Bears soon, and that's not a game I want to lose. I I don't.
The get right game for the Bears. Good Lord, I would hate to be that team.
Yeah.
By the way, the Vikings have been the get right game for a lot of teams.
Yeah. As it turns out, we're the good luck Chuck this year of teams. Wonderful. Can't wait. Cannot wait to see what happens the rest of the season. I'll have you know, however, since we were talking about this the other day, the Denver prices, the tickets for the Denver game that were absurdly high, they are beginning to drop.
Oh, look at us.
So that can mean good things for the live show happening November 17th, 7 p.m. at Flight Co Tower. Fantastic. Well, let's get into the mailbag. We got a bunch of stuff in the mailbag to cover, and importantly, Eric asks our first question, will Caleb Williams live at Edina or Eden Prairie?
So if the Vikings somehow lose more games than the Bears, I guess Caleb Williams will declare, because it sounds like his dad has concerns about the Cardinals and the Bears, but yeah, maybe not the Vikings. I don't know. I don't think that's. I don't think the dad is going to prevent his son from declaring for the draft. I think he's just being weird, and I don't mean like I think the ultimate point that he's trying to make is that the draft is screwy is correct, but I don't think that he's actually going to pull this like leverage, right? That said, not a ton of athletes anymore live in Edina, Eden Prairie. They did, for sure. I think Christian Ponder, I think lived. He lived in Wisconsin for a while, which, maybe that was a problem. But he lived in Eden Prairie. Donovan McNabb also lived in Eden Prairie. I know that Trey Waynes, I think, lived in Eden Prairie. But you take a look at where Vikings players are living now, it's like Mendota Heights. Kirk Cousins, for some reason, lives in Rosemount. No shade to anybody who lives in Rosemount, but would you? Anyway. I think Chad Greenway lives in Wayzata.
It should be stated, Arif hates every single burb. He just hates Bloomington more.
Yeah. No, I hate Edina the most. Let's be clear. But I do hate Bloomington. But I hate Edina the most. And Eden Prairie a fair amount, probably more than Bloomington. So let's, if we're putting it all together in a hate power ranking, Edina and Eden Prairie are into the top.
The hate power ranking for Arif.
Yeah, we got to do a Patreon special for that one, I guess. But God, Woodbury. Ugh. But it was like half bit and half true. Not a Woodbury guy, but we've got I think I said Mendota Heights, but we've got at least one high profile player living in Shakopee. Like I said, Rosemount. They're all over the place. Apple Valley, Orono, Wayzata, it's not so much a Eden Prairie anymore. Justin Jefferson, I think, lives in Egan, right? Because it's close to the practice facility, which, whatever reason you need, Egan's not out of all the burbs, not an awful place. If you have a car, you definitely need a car if you live in Egan. Good Lord, do you need a car if you live in Egan? But, I imagine Jefferson isn't lacking for a car, so he should be fine.
I mean, if nothing else, he could just get a ride with Jordan Addison. At least he knows he'll get there quick.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Second question is from Andre, who asks, did Baker Mayfield scratch all of the defensive blitz signals into the guest locker room bathroom stall?
If you watch the Chargers game, I don't think you would ever be surprised when the Vikings blitz. They made it pretty clear when they were blitzing. When you blitz 82% of the time, it's not about knowing the signals at that point.
No, it's just, all right, so this is just what they're going to be doing all game. What, more than 4 out of 5 times they're going to do this? Okay. Adam West asks, we complained about it under Zimmer, but it happens frequently with Kevin O'Connell too. Why does this team go multiple possessions, full quarters even, without targeting Jefferson so often? Why? Please make sense of this. No other team would do that.
Yes, other teams would do that. They do that. They were just having a discussion about this on the broadcast with Jamar Chase and A.J. Brown. They do that. It just doesn't seem like they do because these players go off for a ton of yards and you kind of remember it after the fact. But yeah, that happens. Again, the way that receivers should be targeted is when they get open. It's not that you should design these targets or force them. They should probably be your primary read, but you should move off those primary reads. That's the whole, if they're good, they'll get open. If they're not good, why are you targeting them? That's the whole thing. So I Like, there might be individual games where I'm just like, okay, this is getting ridiculous. They got to target Justin Jefferson. I will have that opinion. But, like, over the course of one quarter, it doesn't really matter to me. That's fine.
I mean, this isn't a situation where you're breaking out the Randy ratio or something like that.
Yeah, and that one... Okay, so the biggest problem with the Randy ratio was that it was public, right? Like, that's got to be the biggest problem with it. Like, someone else, and this actually happened, I learned, that, like, other teams would just, like, note targets and then note how many went to Randy, and we're like, all right, it's like counting cards in blackjack, right? It's just like, okay, well, the odds that they're going to throw to Randy here now are pretty high because they're well below the 40% that they want. And that happened, and it, like, hurt the offense. So that was the biggest problem. But also, like, yeah, the Randy ratio itself was kind of, it's Randy. He's going to get open. You'll target him. You don't got to. And it was like the most, like, backwards football thing. It's like, hey, we found out that when we target Randy 40% of the time, we win like 80% of the games or something. It was like something like that. And it was like, well, yeah, because when your quarterback sees Randy open on 40% of targets, that means the team they're playing didn't cover him on 40% of routes very well. And so that's why you're winning, is because Randy is getting open that often, not because you threw it to him. That's like the run stat, right? It's like when we run 30 times we win. Yeah, well, because you're up, right? And that's why you're running the ball. So, like that.
The Randy ratio. Will Melvin asks, if peak Adrian Peterson was on this Vikings team, would he be able to get the run game going, and how many fumbles would he have by now?
Oh, God. So I actually was going to, maybe I still can do some live research on the show, but, like, I was wondering if fumble rates had gone up because of, like, and Peanut Tillman has been in the news for reasons that kind of sort of make sense, but don't really.
Nothing about what happened in Chicago or what was rumored to have happened in Chicago made a lick of, like, rational sense.
Yeah.
everything from the lawn care stuff to the no one from the team sticking up for the fired defensive coordinator. Nothing about any of this, what is going on in Chicago, makes a lick of sense. And quite frankly, I could see was it Caleb Williams or whatever, Caleb Williams. I could see his dad and Caleb Williams going, I don't want to be drafted by a team with that GM. Like, that place is a clown show. Like, no. I would be happy to go to Chicago if they got new, like, leadership, but this is ridiculous. Honestly, no free agent should want to go over there. No part of whatever is going on with Peanut Tillman, whether or not it actually happened, makes any, like, rational sense. We're all just dealing in this post, like, apocalyptic world as far as the Bears are concerned.
All right, so I have the fumble percentages. They're approximate, but they're good enough for this discussion. So I knew that fumble rates were pretty high in the 80s. That's, like, one of the arguments that people have for, like, why Walter Payton isn't, like, a top 3 back of all time. It's because he fumbled a lot, but at the time, people just did not care about running back fumbles, and so they didn't coach running backs to, carry the ball tighter to their chest or anything like that. So I knew that they were high, and I thought that they'd gone down and then they'd gone up after the innovation, essentially, of the peanut punch. But no, actually, it turns out running backs have been getting better at holding onto the ball at a rate higher than defenders have been very good at punching the ball out. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. But, like, in the mid 80s, the fumble rate was about 4.2%. In the mid 90s, the fumble rate was about 3.5%. In the mid 2000s, the fumble rate was about 3.3% ish. It dropped off pretty dramatically in 2008. I guess, like, the housing market. I don't know. That's the first thing that comes to mind with 2008. And
the two make so much sense. I mean, let's be honest.
Right. Yeah, it's natural. And the fumble rate in the mid 2010s was 2.7%. So this has consistently been going down. Right now, it's around 2.4%. So the last 4 years, 2.4, 2.5%. So Adrian Peterson's fumble rate, which I also should have looked up for the purposes of this question while we were talking about stuff, but I'm not very smart, is higher than that. I could just say that. It's much higher than that. Let's see if we have the fumble stat here on Pro Football Reference. So he's had 49 fumbles over his career. Sure, it certainly feels like a lot more than that. right? It feels like it's more than 49.
I mean, it feels like he's lost 49 at least.
Right. And okay, well, fumble rates also include quarterbacks, so maybe that's not fair. This says that his fumble rate was 1.4%. I remember it being closer to 2%. So, it's because I used touches instead of carries. That's probably a pretty big reason why. Let's see. I know that he had a bunch of fumbles on receptions, notably one against Seattle in the playoffs. But for now, yeah, it's closer to 2%. So his fumble rate is a little bit higher than Dalvin Cook's, which is remarkably high, and people didn't really accept that until fairly late into his Vikings career when they're like, oh, okay, yeah, it's pretty high. I think he would have fumbled more than Madison in this game, but also it would have been worth it because did you see the blocking in that game? It doesn't even have to be 2012 Peterson. 2014 Peterson, he didn't play technically. 2015 Peterson, important. 2015 Peterson would have housed some of those, and that wasn't even good Peterson. 2007 to 2012 Peterson would have absolutely crushed, right? But that would have been worth it with the fumbles. You'd have 3 more, but you'd have also 3 more touchdowns.
I don't think the record changes much.
Overall, I don't know.
This is enough of a butterfly effect.
Yeah. Well, okay, actually, it might not because of the butterfly effect, right? If you replace all Madison runs with Peterson runs and you add a couple of yards to that, the Vikings convert a lot more first downs on those runs. But that's not what happens. If Peterson is on your team, you're running the ball more. If you're running the ball more, you're less efficient. You're not passing the ball enough. So actually, it may not have changed the record at all. But if you only replaced Madison runs with Peterson runs, it would have improved the team. But if you replace Madison with Peterson, it may have made the team worse.
This is once again another reason to point out why time travel does not work.
Yeah, that's that. Yep,
that is the takeaway. Brian Jellerson asks, should Kevin O'Connell consider relinquishing the red zone play calling to Phillips? I'm not sure how much play calling he already does, if any, but I know Kevin O'Connell is the primary, and it just seems like most of our play calling issues are in the red zone. Am I wrong? I'm probably wrong.
You're probably wrong. First of all, there just have not been that many plays in the red zone, and that's not an indictment of the Vikings' ability to get to the red zone. It's that there have been 3 games in the season. The Vikings' touchdown conversion rate in the red zone is about 50%, which is a little bit below league average. It's not good, right? But last year they were 8th, and they designed some really good red zone plays. So I am not too concerned, and I think that this is the kind of thing that'll tend to correct itself. I don't think that the red zone play calling is a huge issue. I think that the 2-minute stuff, if you extricate that because it's just a different type of play calling, the Vikings are probably fine in the red zone. I don't think it's a big issue.
Next question is from P. Sughart. Sure, why not?
Yeah, why not?
With the time of possession for the Vikings sitting around 25th in the league since the acquisition of Kirk, 3rd before, is this indicative of the overall defensive regression, or could it be from the performance of the offense with Kirk under center being spotty over a full game?
I mean, it's a bit of both, right? So since the acquisition of Kirk, the defense has gotten worse, and a little bit of that has to do with Kirk. Some of that doesn't, but because he's taken up cap space and you can't re-sign some players. But it's not like if you had retained Xavier Rhodes, right? The team would have been better on defense. They wouldn't have been because he was washed, right? So, or Trey Waynes, it wouldn't have been because he got hurt a lot, right? So, a lot of the key defenders for the Vikings stopped being good and left, or both. And so, I don't think so. I think that plays a role, but I don't think it's necessarily do we think that Kirk hurts the Vikings' ability to improve their time of possession, which I don't think is a very important stat for what it's worth. Improve the Vikings' time of possession more than the quarterbacks before him, more than Case Keenum, that. I don't think so. More than I mean, even I hate to say it, but he was playing a lot better than Teddy ever was, right? I imagine had the injury not occurred, Teddy would have turned into a pretty good quarterback, but that's just a supposition, right? But Cousins has played better than Teddy, has played better than Case, has played better than Ponder and McNabb and whoever, right? Matt Castle, right? So probably Sam Bradford. I mean, when Sam Bradford was healthy, he was actually dealing for the Vikes. It's kind of weird, but I don't think that was the issue. So I think it's just like time of possession again is it's such like a complex, like the inputs are so wild that like it's kind of difficult to extract, right? Because you can have a low time of possession and be crushing people, right? Because it could just be you score very quickly because you have an explosive offense, and then the defense gives up long drives where it turns into a field goal, which is actually how a lot of the Kansas City games, before their defense improved over the past 2 years, how a lot of the Kansas City games went, right? They scored very quickly, and then the defense just kind of let people march down the field, and so they would actually lose a lot of time of possession battles and win games. So it's not an important stat. And it's really just a product of a bunch of other problems that you've probably already identified and want to fix anyway.
Next question is from Kenneth Allen, who asks, how long does it take to determine whether or not a coach is a real difference maker? Seems like most coaches are just fine with a small selection having significant positive impact. How long does it take to know if you have one, and what evidence do we have for Kevin O'Connell being one?
I think it takes a fair amount of time from a statistical perspective. I think that I think you need at least 4 seasons for, it to kind of bear out in a way where it's like detectable by statistics, right? Because I don't think anybody disagrees that like Andy Reid is a phenomenal coach. I know that there's a lot of disagreement over Bill Belichick, which I think is stupid. I think he's one of the all-time greats as a coach, but like some people are like, only with Brady, right? Which again, numerically, I see where you're coming from, but but like, Pete Carroll, Andy Reid, probably Kyle Shanahan. They've all played enough games by a significant margin, or not played enough, coached enough games by a significant margin for us to know that they're good coaches. Mike Tomlin, obviously one of the greatest coaches that usually doesn't get brought up first in these discussions of great coaches, but like a really phenomenal coach. It takes a while for that to bear out statistically. And from that perspective, we don't have enough data on Kevin O'Connell. I would say you probably need 3 years of data anyway, regardless of what your metric is, to get a good sense of whether or not somebody is a good coach. And by good, in this case, have a significant impact on a team's likelihood of winning versus an average coach, which we don't have like a lot of great examples that come off the top of our head in terms of an average coach, because the ones that are in the discussion are always like the best ones or the worst ones. But who's coaching the? Okay, I like all these coaches. I was like, who's coaching the Lions? No, he rules. Who's coaching the Packers? No, he's probably good, right? I'm just like going through my head.
He does have quite the winning percentage that Belichick is still trying to chase.
Still trying to catch up to, yeah, as Justice loves to point out. Robert Saleh is probably not a good. Oh, Sean McDermott. I think he's an average coach. Like, obviously, developing Josh Allen, that rules. I think he's probably an average coach. Maybe that's a good example of one where it's like they're very good as a team. And I think that's primarily a talent thing, and it's hard to separate talent from coaching. But yeah, like is Kevin O'Connell like a Kyle Shanahan or a Sean McVay, or is he Sean McDermott, or I don't know, Frank Reich? Is he average? Sure.
Also from Kenneth Allen, absent the Lions imploding, which, well, Lions, it seems like the Vikings' chances for competing this season are mostly shot. Given that, what would you want to see out of this lost season? Whose development matters the most, and what can the team do to set itself up for 2024?
I don't think it's a lost season yet. Look.
Have you seen this division? This season is not lost yet.
Yeah, look. Jordan Love. Whew, what an interesting set of plays to evaluate. But yeah, this season's not lost yet. Obviously, you've got the Bears, and so that's, you would, if they lose any of the 2 games against the Bears and the season has not turned around by then, like if they're like skating on like a 1 or 2 or 3 win season by the time they play the Bears and they lose, then obviously like, yeah, that's it. Pack it up, start playing Kairos Tonga more, start playing Jaquelin Roy more. Like, I don't know what we're doing here. See if Andrew Booth has anything. Protect Byron Murphy. Don't have him play. That's kind of where you're at. But like, You're not at a lost season. So there's something interesting with Jordan Love where, like, I think before this week, someone had pointed out that his EPA per play and his success rate or CPOE were just so radically different that we didn't know what to do with it. It was a Packers blog, and so they were just like, "Yeah, he's probably good." Oh my god. So in so he's upper left of the. So the Patrick Mahomes is always in the upper right of these quarterback charts. Up and to the right, I think, is the hashtag they sometimes use. You don't often see up and to the left for anybody, and Jordan Love is that. So right now, Tua is skewing the charts because of that 70-point game, but which, fair enough. But Jordan Love ranks third in EPA per play and 33rd in completion percentage over expected. And so there's like this huge conversation, like, well, who is this guy? Is he good? Is it sustainable? What's going on? And personally, I think because CPOE is kind of a success rate metric and it predicts EPA a little bit better than EPA does, this would suggest he's actually not that good. The Packers faithful have pointed out that A, in success rate, he's about average, league average, but B, a lot of the plays that are not getting counted either in the numerator or denominator in completion percentage include like pass interference penalties like that he's drawn. I would argue that right now the evidence would suggest that he's not that good, which to me means that the division is like wide open. I am turning around on Jared Goff. He seems to actually be good, and I gotta shelve like my look. He hadn't played well for like a good chunk, like 3 straight years. He's probably bad. I gotta update that with the last 2 years. So we'll see. But this is not over. That said, I just named a bunch of players that need more playing time. Mekhi Blackman is one of them. You probably do want more Josh Metellus time. You probably want less Harrison Smith time. And I don't know, man. Lewis Cine is almost certainly bad at football, right? Like, that's the only way he doesn't see the field. But they should, in that scenario where they're just like, this season is kaput, they should just play him, right? Just to shut up the conversation. Like, Andrew Booth, go out there. Lewis Cine, go out there. And if you all play lights out, that rules, right? Now we're cooking. And if you don't, now we know.
Next question's from Fred Monticello, who asks, who is the better 0-3 team? 2020 Vikings or 2023 Vikings?
I looked it up. The answer is 2023. Couple of ways that we know that. One is DVOA through 3 weeks. Another one is in point differential. The 2020 team was negative 27 in point differential. The 2023 team is negative 13. I will say that the 2020 Vikings, they just had a worse defense and a better offense, at least by my eye, at least by like my memory of like how that offense was going. Obviously, not having Justin Jefferson and instead having scrubs like Stephon Diggs, that kind of hurts, but. Yeah, from my memory of the 2020 Vikings, it was just like this defense is catastrophic. And maybe it's because, they gave up 40 points off the bat, right, to the Packers. But, that Titans team scored 31 with Tajay Sharp, right? Like, I think that was the Tajay Sharp game. Or maybe I'm confusing with another Titans early season game. But, like, that Titans team scored a lot of points that year, but like that year, it wasn't like it was primarily because of like Derrick Henry and stuff like that. I think 28 points to Phillip Rivers. I just think that like that defense was just worse. Like if you give up a bunch of points to the Eagles, like fine. And a bunch here is 34, right? That Eagles team is like very good, like extremely good. I don't know, man. That Colts team was fine. It really felt like that defense was like much worse. And so I'm going to go with the 2020 team being worse.
Next question is from Buck for Reef's I'm tall as AF corner. Is it time to reverse the Morris Stroud rule?
What?
Are you not familiar with the Morris Stroud rule?
I'm not familiar with the Morris Stroud rule. Is that the field goal interference?
Yes.
Oh my God. Okay, great. I'm Googling him right now. Oh, he's from Clark. That's so cool. And he was a power forward. Specifically at blocking field goals, 6'10". Yeah, yeah, let's reverse it. That go, if you're able to goaltend, that rules. That's so funny. Like, you know how I am. I love funny plays. I love like that's absurd that you'd be able to do that, and I don't know why you wouldn't reward that. I it why I don't know why it's called because it's like a palpably unfair act is like the thing, right? Like that's like it falls under that. I think that you do have to like you can't touch the field goal. You can't use it to assist you. You can't hang off of it. You can't if you touch it while you go up. Like I that's all fine. But like that's just basically like why would we have a goaltending rule? Like because on the trajectory up, obviously you can block it just like in basketball, and on the trajectory down you can't. This isn't basketball. Like why? Why is that the same? I don't know why that is unfair. I don't know why they changed that rule. That's such a funny rule.
Next question is going to be from CJ Oppenhammer, who asks Oppenhammer. At this point, it doesn't matter.
I think it's Oppenhammer, right?
Yeah, just trying to include as many things as possible. The Vikings clearly took out a luck loan last year and are now paying it back with interest. Is it best for them to continue to pay the weekly minimums, attempt to pay extra towards the principal, or double down on refinancing?
This is not a good luck market for you to refinance in. I would not try to get luck out of the house by refinancing now. You're just going to pay an enormous amount in luck interest down the road. It is just not a good market for it. A couple of years ago, much better market for it. So that's probably when you'd want to do it. That's probably why the Vikings took out the luck loan, because they saw the market was about to go up. And so they took advantage of it when they could, which is fine. But you don't want to refinance now. I would say you'd want to pay extra towards the principal. I don't think the Vikings are in a window right now where if they win a couple of extra games or get a couple of extra points here or there because of the turnovers and stuff like that, that they're going to make a credible run at the Super Bowl. I think they just need to shore up that defense before they can do that. And so I think that you want to pay extra on the principal now so that you can have it paid off by the time you are ready for a Super Bowl run. And then, depending on the luck market, you can actually take out another luck loan then, right? But like right now, I think it's just a bad market for it. And that may be because I personally am experiencing a lot of bad luck. Maybe my perception of the market is a little bit skewed, but I would say the luck market is awful.
Is that, I mean, you did get your car back eventually.
Yeah, I feel like the word eventually, it really underscores my point more than anything.
It's doing a lot of work there. It's doing a lot of work. Noah asks, if the Vikings commit to the bit of being anti-2022 Vikings, which games left on their schedule will be the funniest for the Vikings to win by 30?
So my first thought immediately was the Chiefs, and that's still like a top, like that's definitely an answer. But that said, it would be very funny if on the road against the Bears, they won by 30 plus. Of course, the Bears are bad. Of course, you're supposed to beat them by a lot. But the Vikings don't do very well against the Bears on the road. And the Vikings are very often a get-right game for a lot of teams. See the Chargers, right? See the Lions also last year. So, like, I just feel like it would be hilarious if the Vikings laid down the law against – maybe the law is the wrong – given Alan Wood. No, lay down the law.
Lay down the law. Arif's, very, very clear about how the law works.
Yeah, I'm engaging in two other legal actions that I do not have the ability to speak on a public podcast right now. So I am very law right now. I
all the
love
law.
it. I love it, and I'm not frustrated at all.
Clearly.
But yeah, that would be funny. So that's up there. I think San Francisco would be hilarious because that's like exactly the kind of team that the Vikings just can't beat. Both stylistically, because if you blitz them a lot, like they know exactly how to respond to that. They have the best after catch team in the NFL, but also just like spiritually, the Vikings just can't do well against San Francisco. Like it's just from an essence standpoint, these teams are diametrically opposed. And so if the Vikings like beat them up by 30 points, very funny. I still think beating the Chiefs by 30 plus is funny, but like beyond that, I think Bears on the road and San Francisco both are like really good. This would be funny for a beatdown. Like And like, some teams it's not funny to win by a lot. Like the Chargers, that's not funny. We're all expecting a crazy game, Vikings Chargers, and we kind of got one. I will say we did not get double the crazy. We just got a normal amount of crazy. It was not additive or multiplicative. It was just a normal amount of crazy. But still, I enjoyed that a lot more than if it had been like just a 30-point beatdown. It would have felt like we built up this game for nothing. So
there's that. Nolan Kaler asks, for North Code, which of our brothers in Bud Grant are about to be signed to bolster this team? Which Blue Bomber is going to be the most impactful to help right the ship?
So based off my extensive knowledge of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers roster, my first thought was Drew Wolitarsky, former Gopher, right? I saw that name in my brain, of course, not online on a roster sheet or anything like that. But like in my head, I was like, oh, Drew Wolitarsky. But, he's not the leading receiver. The leading receiver is Dalton Schoen, a Kansas State Wildcat. Maybe legend is a strong word, but a former Kansas State Wildcat whose workouts were up the NFL worthy, right? And I was like, that'd be kind of cool to grab that guy. But then I was like, do the Vikings really need help at receiver? Is that the area where they need help? So I was like, who has the most pass deflections or interceptions? Or who has the most sacks, right? And I know that Jackson Jeffcoat's on the team. I believe he's all Big 12. I know that he's like in college, he was an extremely good pass rusher. But I also was like trying to rack my brain. Like there is somebody on that team besides Jackson Jeffcoat that's been doing a great job bringing down the quarterback. And it's Willie Jefferson, who's been having a great year. He's forced a couple of fumbles. He's got 8 quarterback sacks. He's got a bunch of tackles. So that's great. So it could have been him. But honestly, I just think at corner, this guy, Demario Houston, who I know very well as a fan of the Blue Bombers, evidently did not do a pro day. So we don't have his numbers. But he's 5'10", 170 pounds. So he's not really NFL size. But boy, does he have a lot of interceptions. He's a lot of interceptions. He's 7. Like, that's pretty good. So grab that guy. Plus, he's got 3 fumble recoveries. And, if that is a skill, at least have somebody do it, right? Like, he's recovered a lot of fumbles. It's about time somebody does that. So,
Yeah. Deez asks, for the dating corner, which celebrity would be the most annoying to have associated with the Vikings if they dated a player on the team? I'm torn between Lizzo, Jennifer Lawrence, and Robert Downey Jr.
Okay, so like, I think Lizzo is mostly annoying because she was like kind of everywhere and became national. And then there's also like she treated a DoorDash driver really awful. And then after that, there's like the multiple cancellations from other dancers. That there's a whole thing, but that's not inherently annoying. It's just like annoying because of coverage, I guess. Is Robert Downey Jr. actually annoying? Like, I know Tony Stark would be annoying, but the whole point of that acting performance for Downey is that Tony Stark is who he used to be, and he's no longer that guy, which is the whole point of Tony Stark's career arc anyway. That's like why Downey would he be annoying? I don't know anything about him. If we're going to talk about like people from Iron Man, Gwyneth Paltrow would be way more annoying if she was dating a Viking. Way more annoying. And their health would get worse because she has the most interesting ideas about health. Ones that doctors and nutritionists and honestly biologists, because that's how out there it is, have consistently pushed back on and said, hey, this one's dangerous. Let's not do this one. Or, hey, this other one is also dangerous. Let's not do this one. But also she's like just a very annoying celebrity personality. Maybe interpersonally she's fine. Again, don't know these people.
I think there's one that's just sticking out that you're missing here.
Well, I did mention one before the show. Is it the one that I mentioned then?
No, it's
that not. One sucks. Is it better than that?
I think Avril is the one that we're missing here.
I don't know how annoying that
Can you imagine
be.
The Melissa chance?
God, that sounds so funny.
That's where all this is going. I feel like
listen, the one I mentioned before the show that would be the most annoying is Jake Paul. So
Arif's neglected resistance bands asks, would it be beneficial for the team to tank, and how would you sell it to ownership? Intentionally tanking seems to cause them physical pain. The Brandon Powell Doctrine asks, for Arif's infernal packed corner, suppose an infernal being brokered a deal with Kevin O'Connell whilst JJ was lying on the turf injured with the following terms: if you lose this game in a heartbreaking fashion, I will not take JJ from you. Did Kevin O'Connell make the right call?
I mean, that's like one game versus like 10 games. Yeah, of course he made the right call.
Yeah,
it's not close.
Yeah, there's no way that that possibly could be. Luke Braun's dad asks, can you name a time when you were so mad your teeth fell out, excluding the story of the cops stealing your car?
I mean, what about the time I was fired? I'm going to put that one up there. That was not great.
Like, we're just gonna include that. Yeah.
But yeah, my teeth absolutely fell out. Also, I no longer have dental insurance.
That's unfortunate. As somebody who really used it there for a while, that's a thing.
Yeah, absolutely used it.
I'm trying to think, have I ever been so mad that my teeth could have fallen out? I felt so bad for the guy because, like, he was the main character on Twitter for a couple of hours.
Oh, the Jets guy?
Yeah, the Jets guy whose teeth were like...
Yeah, I guess. I don't like... he doesn't, like, deserve that, but also, like... It wasn't like people were, like, doxing him or anything, like, unless they were. If they were, I missed it, and I hope they didn't, but, like...
No, I didn't see any of that. It was just feeling bad for... it was just the guy, clearly upset about where his Jets have fallen.
And rightfully so. They were not moving from Zach Wilson.
No, they I keep seeing these, like, trade, like, New York media people trying to talk about different quarterbacks they should pick up. And it's so funny to watch. Because this team, as a result of the injury, is so messed up. And they are absolutely tied to a quarterback who is likely going to try to play next year. So they're not going to be able to, like, do anything with a first round pick. Like, everything, like, gets messed up as a result of this injury. It's so fun to watch. And all because they decided to take on Aaron Rodgers and his BS. It's just so much fun. This is what you get. This is actually the karma police here. Enjoy. Next question is from the pessimistic Minnesota sports fan, who asks, for Arif's backing James into a corner, what's the best way to force James to say the original name of the kicker, Fairbairn, on the podcast? Should I change my username on the Discord to his original name? Should I make a PayPal donation to the show under the name of his name? He says it like twice here. And if so, how much? Should I purchase the Vikings and give up multiple draft picks to acquire his name in order to help him miss extra points until James finally says his name?
So that last one wouldn't work because James would just say Kaimi Fairbairn instead of the full name. I think that you have to make a PayPal donation, and I don't just say that because I personally benefit from that, but because he just says the names of the PayPal donors. Like if you change your username on Discord and submitted a question, he could just choose not to answer that question, right? He controls the questions, right? So I don't think that would work. I think you have to make a donation under that name, which, again, I fully understand that answer helps me. But, like, that is the way he says stuff.
That is one of the ways, yes. And, when I did the when I read the romance novel thing, that was because people paid me to say things. Like, I absolutely do it. I absolutely do things for money. Like, this is famously, quite famously. I announced a couple of volleyball games this weekend. So yeah, famously. Aaron asks, for Arif's outdoor oven corner, why is it when men cook outdoors it's called barbecuing, but when women do it it's called witchcraft? What is so suspicious about setting up a stock pot in the woods over a fire? People love soup in the fall. Also, what kind of soup could lead to a Vikings win at some point this season?
Okay. Look, if you're
Now look.
now look now look, if you're making stock in the woods, the odds
it's
of
a
that.
stock pot. It's not necessarily stock. You can put.
What she says, broth, right?
No, she didn't say anything about broth.
Okay.
The show notes are literally in front of you. Literally.
And so, who cares?
How many tabs do you have open right now?
163.
That's not an estimation. That's literally what it says.
Yeah, it's because I've got a tab tracker,
Yes.
which has helped me a lot, it turns out. So, and it doesn't technically count the incognito tabs, but I usually don't have many up. I usually only do it when I search something that like I don't want in my search history for recommendations, like the Taylor Swift stuff, right? With like Travis Kelce. I don't want Taylor Swift stuff recommended to me. So I will open like an incognito tab and just be like, okay, is this thing true? And I'll look it up and I'll be like, okay, glad I'm good. So It's probably at 163, but there is the possibility that it's not.
The Taylor Swift stuff is just going to come naturally to your phone, listening to your every word. Like you just want it to come naturally. Naturally.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'll get product recommendations in my Twitter feed, right, instead of Google search results. Right, that's better. Obviously, that's what I want.
Yes.
So the soup thing. If you're making soup in the woods, I think that because the odds of something getting into that soup are so high, I think that, and you know that. I just feel like that that's not soup and that we don't need to play the game. That's a witch's brew. That's a cauldron, actually, that you're working with here.
At what point does it go from like stock pot to cauldron?
I think that our perception of cauldrons has limited our ability to really define the cauldron in a way that's helpful, because cauldrons, obviously, we have this perception, you've got this lip, and then it kind of balloons out, right? It's spherical in some way, or spheroid, I guess, more accurately.
A bit
and
like,
then it bubbles back in.
A bit like a Bugs Bunny cartoon where he's like stuck inside of this giant thing on a fire.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so that's like what and I imagine that is like the definition of a cauldron by some specific equipment standard, but like the way that we think of cauldrons, it's more by functions, right? It's like when you're, I don't know, casting a spell, and it could be a warlock, it doesn't have to be a witch, and witches don't have to be women, they could be men, right? Like it's all up there. But if you're casting a spell and using ingredients in a pot, I think from a functional perspective, that is a cauldron. So that's an important thing to understand. What kind of soup could lead to the Vikings win at some point in the season? I just feel like a strong bone broth, which, by the way, a good way to make that would include chicken's feet because they have a lot of connective tissue in them. I wouldn't throw in like unsanitary ingredients like guano. I would avoid that one. But I'm sure like chicken wings or bat wings or whatever, those are probably fine so long as they're appropriately cooked. But like a strong, like a bone broth.
I think this is going to call for like a stone soup sort of thing, or just a full-on stew. I think is what's going to end up being necessary.
Stew would be great. Yeah,
I think a good stew is what's going to be required here. Don from Ohio asks, what is more frustrating, the Vikings being 0-3 or that I am 3-0 in the Hell League? I had to check this. He is actually 3-0 and I believe the number one person in that league.
Yeah, that is more frustrating. Actually.
That is terrible.
But it does prove that the Hell League is not about skill.
Absolutely not. He couldn't be bothered to do anything with his teams last year. Famously, I yelled at him about that at one point. Let me check something here, because if he is doing what I think he's doing, then I can disqualify him. So let's pull up his team right now. His team is listed as Arif's uncle. It's a hell of a picture for him. No, he's not even cheating. Damn, I thought I could catch
It would
him.
have been funny if he drew attention to his team, only for it to be the. So he's got the right number of kickers.
That is exactly what I just checked.
Huh.
Which is to say, a number of you people are going to get some nasty messages and some forfeits here, because I warned people week 1 about having 3 kickers, and that the warning days are past. You're going to start losing games. I know there's at least a couple of teams that have broken this rule. So now that the Monday night games are over, you guys get to deal with the consequences of that. Yeah, he is 3-0. I am incredibly frustrated, actually. That is not okay. Did he beat me? No, he has not beaten me yet. Okay, good. He will eventually, and I just know that I'll have to deal with it.
It is very funny that his 2 kickers are Daniel Carlson and Greg Joseph. That's actually very funny.
I don't understand any of this is possible. Yeah, I'm scheduled to face him week 11 of all things.
He did not score very many points this week. I cannot believe he won.
Yeah. Finally, from Don from Ohio, for James and Arif's legal action corner, a corner that we've gone to a lot lately. Hey guys, so this is referring to his question last episode about needing to get his wife a birthday gift, whether or not it was going to be the $25 like free chips that they got for the casino, or the free muffin.
Yeah.
Hey guys, so while my wife slept, I went and I used the $25 free slot play. I didn't win a dime, and I was so depressed that I used the coupon to eat the blueberry muffin. With those options no longer available for an anniversary gift, I did take your advice and decided to get something cotton for our anniversary from the hotel. I took the cotton sheets from the bed, wrapped them up in one of their gift shop bags, and my wife had a look of bewilderment when she opened them, especially since they were wrinkled. The next day, we got a knock on our door in the late afternoon. The concierge was wanting to know what happened to what happened to the hotel sheets, since they weren't in the room when housekeeping came in. In a desperate act, I blurted out Luke Braun stole them from our room. Come to find out, Luke had already had an unpaid bill at the hotel we stayed at. Apparently, he and his rabbits trashed the hotel to the tune of $3,200. I was told since I let him stay with us, I was on the hook for the sheets and his unpaid bill. My question is this: should I take Luke to civil court to get my money back, or should I hawk my wife's wedding ring for the money and tell her the ring must have slipped off while she was sleeping?
Okay, so that last option is so obviously bad. It's so awful. Like, clearly take Luke to civil court. Obviously. He stole the sheets from the hotel room and implicated you, and also didn't pay the hotel bill. Allegedly, to both of those.
Yes.
So, yeah, you should definitely take Luke to civil court. I would suggest that next time you don't put it in writing that Luke did not commit the crime he clearly committed by saying that you stole the sheets and then blamed Luke. Like, I think that is an interesting piece of fiction writing, but it just doesn't help your case in civil court. And, you should erase that. In the meantime, erase all of the potential evidence that could implicate you. So all of your social media presence, you should probably just delete that.
Yep.
That includes Discord. Probably just delete that, just so that you can win this civil case.
Yeah. All in the name of, and even after the civil case, because some of these things can be like revisited over the years.
Yeah, they can be litigated. Yeah.
Yeah. It's best to just remove your footprint completely. Maybe even disappear for a while. Like, that's also a possibility. I like how through all of this you did everything you could to not lie to his spouse. You at no point did you say anything about lying to Don from Ohio's spouse. I feel like you're growing as a person.
I deeply regret the one moment I suggested that for the purposes of providing a surprise gift that you at some point potentially just a white lie about the gift so that you could surprise her. I regret that. I will never recommend Dawn do anything that in a universal maxim type category could be interpreted as unethical.
No, everything from Don from Ohio from this point forward is completely ethical.
That's not what I said.
Wasn't it though?
No, I just want to make sure that the advice that I provide can't be so easily misinterpreted. It will be misinterpreted because that's what he does.
Yeah.
But it can't be so easily misinterpreted to do something like that.
Well, that seems like a fine note to end on, being as technically correct as we possibly could be. That is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. We'll be back on Thursday evening, Friday morning with a preview of our next game. So, Arif, what do you have to plug?
So like I said, I've got that piece up over at the Wide Left Substack. Right now, like I mentioned, I've got a lot of stuff going on that is going to make it pretty difficult. Plus, it is my birthday on the 27th, so I may post just a little bit less on Wide Left just because of all of that. So that's currently up. I may explore some of the biggest blowouts in history. I don't know. The game is passed, right? The Dolphins-Broncos game, so I may not be able to actually explore it, but we'll see if that comes up. And if not, we'll be able to preview next week's game. So that's over up at Wide Left.
That is it for this episode. Again, we'll see you guys later this week. For Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember to maybe just put that in the garage next time. And we'll be back later this week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of Pro Football Network, and he can be found at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a few different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merchandise. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
All things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.